The first thing to understand is how quiet it was when the plane touched down. No cheering family, no press conference, no relief-filled celebration. Just a stretcher rolling onto the tarmac, carrying a young man who had left home curious and ambitious and returned unable to speak, move, or open his eyes. His name was Otto Warmbier, and his story would become one of the most haunting modern travel tragedies of the 21st century. Otto grew up in Wyoming, Ohio, a suburb where life followed familiar rhythms: school, sports, college plans, optimism. He was bright, well-liked, and driven. At the University of Virginia, he studied economics and global affairs, fascinated by the wider world and eager to experience it firsthand. Friends described him as adventurous but cautious, curious but not reckless. In late 2015, during winter break, Otto joined a guided tour to one of the most secretive countries on Earth, North Korea. The trip was marketed as safe. Western tourists had visited before, escorted carefully, shown curated streets and monuments, told where to look and where not to ask questions. Otto's parents hesitated, but he reassured them. It was just a short trip, a glimpse behind the curtain, a story to tell when he got back. On the surface, the visit unfolded as expected. Group tours, approved hotels, carefully choreographed interactions. But beneath that surface, North Korea is a place where symbolism is sacred and disobedience, real or imagined, can carry terrifying consequences. On the final night of the trip, something happened that would change everything. In the early hours of January 1st, 2016, surveillance footage later released by North Korean authorities appeared to show a young man entering a restricted area of a hotel and removing a propaganda banner from a wall. The footage was grainy, the face indistinct, the intent unclear. But North Korea claimed it was Otto. As he prepared to leave the country, Otto was stopped at the airport, pulled aside, detained. His tour group watched as he was taken away, powerless to intervene. For weeks, his family heard nothing. Then came the confession. North Korean state media released a video showing Otto, pale and shaken, reading a prepared statement. He admitted to attempting to steal the poster, claiming he had been encouraged by a church and offered a used car in return. His voice trembled. His eyes darted. To many observers, it felt less like a confession and more like a performance under immense pressure. In March 2016, Otto was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. 15 years. For a college student with no criminal history. For a poster. Back home, disbelief turned into horror. The Warmbier family launched an international campaign. Politicians spoke out. Human rights organizations condemned the sentence. But North Korea remained unmoved. Months passed, then more months. Behind closed doors, something went terribly wrong. What exactly happened to Otto during his imprisonment remains one of the most disturbing mysteries of the case. North Korea would later claim that shortly after sentencing, Otto contracted botulism, was given a sleeping pill, and fell into a coma. Doctors outside the country would strongly dispute that explanation. There were no independent witnesses, no medical records shared in full, no transparency. For over a year, Otto's parents didn't even know if their son was alive. Then, suddenly, in June 2017, the phone rang. North Korea announced that Otto was being released on humanitarian grounds. He was in a coma, they said, but stable. When the medical evacuation plane landed back in the United States, doctors were unprepared for what they found. Otto was breathing on his own. His eyes were open, but there was no sign of awareness. Brain scans showed extensive damage, injury consistent with prolonged oxygen deprivation. He could not speak. He could not respond. He could not recognize his parents. The boy who had left full of curiosity had returned, trapped in silence. Doctors determined that his injuries were not consistent with botulism. There was no evidence of the disease, no signs of an allergic reaction. What they did find suggested severe neurological trauma, likely caused by lack of oxygen for an extended period of time. How that happened, whether through mistreatment, neglect, or something worse, remains unknown. Otto was brought home to Ohio. His parents stayed by his side, hoping for a miracle. They talked to him, played his favorite music, told him stories, but the damage was catastrophic. 6 days later, on June 19, 2017, Otto Warmbier died. He was 22 years old. The world reacted with outrage. The U.S. government condemned North Korea in the strongest terms. President Trump described Otto's treatment as brutal. Sanctions were tightened. Travel restrictions increased. The death of one student reshaped policy, hardening attitudes toward the regime led by Kim Jong-un. North Korea, in turn, denied responsibility. They insisted Otto had been treated humanely, that his condition was due to illness, not abuse. But the explanations raised more questions than answers. Why was medical care delayed? Why was his family not notified sooner? Why release him only when his condition was irreversible? Otto's parents refused to let those questions fade. They spoke publicly about their son, not as a political symbol, but as a human being. A young man who loved sports, joked with friends, dreamed about the future. They described the pain of watching him return home, alive but already lost. In 2018, a U.S. court ruled that North Korea was responsible for Otto's death, awarding his family damages. It was a symbolic victory. North Korea did not participate and did not pay, but it placed legal responsibility where many believed it belonged. Otto's story became a warning about authoritarian systems where laws are weapons, a warning about the risks hidden behind curated tourist experiences, a warning that curiosity, in the wrong place, can be mistaken for defiance. But it is also a story about empathy, about a family who turned unimaginable grief into advocacy, about a name that forced the world to confront uncomfortable truths, about the cost of silence and secrecy. Years later, Otto Warmbier is remembered not for the poster he allegedly touched, but for the life he never got to live. A life interrupted by a system that offered no mercy, no accountability, and no clear answers. And every time his name is spoken, it echoes with a question that still has no resolution. What really happened to Otto Warmbier?